Welcome, everyone. I'm Dick Deming, Medical Director of Mercy One Cancer Center and the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series. It's brought to you in part by a grant from the Iowa Oncology Society. Our topic tonight is fear of recurrence and other things that go bump in the night. And our guest is my friend, Julie Larson. Julie is a mental health counselor, and she does incredible work both at the Mercy One Richard Deming Cancer Center and with Above and Beyond Cancer. And it's just so much fun to have you here this evening.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
And so before we talk about the topic, which I think anyone who's diagnosed with cancer, even with, a stage 1A cancer with 99% cure rate, still worries about fear of recurrence. But before we talk about that, let's get to know you.
Sure.
So where did you grow up?
Well, I was born and raised in Indiana.
Okay.
So not too different from Iowa.
And how big of a high school?
Oh, goodness. How big was my high? I think my graduating class was 420.
Okay. So big high school.
Yeah.
So what was your claim to fame in your high school?
Oh, well, I kind of have two identities. Me most as oncology and therapy, which is what I've done for the last 2+ decades. But I grew up as a performer, a singer, actress, dancer, and that took me to my first identity before I shifted gears.
Cool. So high school, that was a big high school. So you probably had a performing art.
Oh, we did.
What role on stage in high school are you most proud of?
Oh, in high school. Well, because in high school, so I'm older.
You're not older than me.
And so the rage, like everybody wanted to be Sandy in Grease, and I was.
You were Sandy in Grease.
So so that feels kind of big for high school. Yeah.
And then when you graduate from high school, where did you go next?
So I graduated from high school and I went to Miami of Ohio for undergrad.
Okay.
So
and your major?
My undergrad major was psychology and a minor in family studies. And I thought I would go immediately from undergrad straight into graduate school for my doctorate in psychology.
So you didn't have the desire to go to Juilliard or go into performing arts?
Oh, well, I might have, but my parents were like, listen, you got this talent.
Okay.
You don't need to study it. Study something else.
And then did you do performing arts in college?
I sure did. I performed. I never went home. I left for college and I never came home. I performed every summer in the theme parks.
Okay.
So I was at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, and on all of the shows.
Okay, college.
Yep.
The role in college on stage you're most proud of.
Role in college. Well, interesting. This is kind of a little interesting. I was in West Side Story as a Puerto Rican. That seems a little interesting, right?
Did you get to be like Anita?
I wasn't Anita. I was Consuela. But we did All of America because I'm a dancer too. So
right. Okay, good. And then when you got your degree, did you go directly into graduate school or did you go into the workforce?
I, on a whim with a group of friends, might be the summer before my senior year of college, went to New York City and did an audition. And they all were theater majors and I was not. In fact, the funny story is they all had headshots. They were fancy. And I had my mom fax me my senior picture. So I walked into a New York City audition with a fax.
And this is audition as a singer, dancer?
This is audition for a Broadway tour. And I was just doing it for fun, but I got cast.
Wow.
And so that was like, because when you grow up in the Midwest, you're like, I don't know, am I good or not? And then that happened. And I was like, well, look at that.
What was the show?
That was also for the Broadway tour of Grease. And I was in the ensemble for that, the understudy of Rizzo. But I turned it, which probably sounds shocking to a lot of people, but I wanted to go back and finish my undergrad degree. I wanted to get my college degree. But it was at that point that I knew maybe I'm not going to grad school. Maybe I'm going to the Big Apple and maybe I'm going to go be a performer. So I moved from undergrad to New York City with the big white way dreams, so that's what I did.
Right. And did that include waitressing? Or?
It sure did. It included like many jobs, waitressing, working in retail for my clothes, working in waitressing to eat. I think I babysat to be in a beautiful home because I lived in an apartment that was this big. So I did all those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. And then when did you shift to being, to
I did
decide
for,
that you weren't going to
Mhm.
make a lifelong career of being a performer?
Yeah, I loved it. And I was cast and I did a number of great shows and toured the country and did a lot of really neat things. But I think at one point I just was like, I want to do something more. I don't want every curtain to fall and to feel like I'm back on the audition line. I think that I have many, many dreams for my life, and I can't pursue this one at the sacrifice of so many others. So I applied to grad school. I was accepted at Columbia. So I went back to get my master's in social work at Columbia and graduated after with my master's, and then immediately began work in oncology. And now I've been doing this work for over 20 years and have to say that while as exciting as that performing life sounds, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. This is my calling. This is what I'm good at.
And so you were living in New York City, you got your master's there, and you stayed and worked in oncology in New York City.
Yep.
So most of the time when you get your master's in social work, there's like different things you do until you sort of find maybe what your niche is. How did you, what were the various aspects of being a social worker right after you got your master's in social work? The various things you did in the world of oncology. I kind of think of it, and I'm not a social worker, but I sort of think of social workers, there's sort of the pragmatic of connecting patients with services and transportation and housing and financial aid and sort of that pragmatic. And then I think of the counseling
clinical
part of social work. Did you do both at the beginning?
I think your lens of that is probably very accurate. Social work is huge. You can do so much with a degree in social work, and by and large, social workers are professionals that roll up their sleeve and get in the trenches. We are in the trenches type of professionals, right? So, when I was at Columbia, the way that they structured their program was that you had to decide whether you were administrative and policy or whether you were clinical. And then so I went a clinical track. And then if you did a clinical track, then there's so many other areas where that might be school social work or social welfare or addiction or significant psychosis, like schizophrenia and psychosis. So you did different things. And I chose health. I think for me, I wanted to work with individuals who were relatively high functioning, dealing with an acute crisis. And one of the differentiating factors between social work and psychology and all these different things is that social workers are trained in a strength-based perspective. That is our lens. That is the lens with which all social workers are trained. And I still lean back on that very much in my work. And that means that you have someone struggling in front of you. And unlike a medical model where you're clicking off everything that is not functioning and everything that is not there, a strength-based perspective is looking at everything that is. How is this working? How is this system, whether that's a family or a group, or how is this individual making it through? So I appreciate that about social work. So but Columbia also, you said you as a student, you said what you thought you wanted to do, and Columbia was very astute at saying, well, then we're going to do your first year internship in something that is the exact opposite of what you think, just so that you as students don't pigeonhole yourselves. So my first year internship was with the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. And I worked in supervised visitation and wrote court reports for guardian ad litem and all of that stuff. So I worked in the court system. And then I went to NYU Medical Center and I worked in craniofacial plastic surgery. And then after I did craniofacial plastic surgery, which were children that were born with facial anomalies and their families. And then I went into oncology and hematology.
And when you did your first rotations, which medical center were you at for your oncology? Was
NYU.
Hassenfeld.
Yeah. So I was at the pediatrics. So I was at NYU Medical Center, and then Hassenfeld is their pediatric oncology, hematology. Yeah.
And then over time, as you get more experience and you get the chance to, you're no longer doing a rotating internship, you're getting to choose what are the job openings, what do I want to do, as you then focused on oncology.
Yep.
And did you have I know that you have an interest in young adults. I don't know if that was a part of the job, or that was the job, or
Well,
how did you?
You nailed it before when you said, especially in a hospital system, the role of a social worker is often very practical in discharge planning and very, all of those logistics and practical needs. And while that is critical and very, very important, I personally very much enjoyed and felt very passionate about more of the clinical work. So I didn't want to work in a hospital, which was the highest paying job for a social worker. But I didn't want that job. I wanted to be more clinical. So I went to the national nonprofit Cancer Care. And when I worked at Cancer Care is a national organization that provides free supportive services to anyone impacted by a cancer diagnosis. So any diagnosis, caregivers, bereaved, survivors. And I initially began working with children. And I did a lot of my graduate school training in working with little kids, play therapy and working with children. And as I began to do that work, I began to notice that what I was really loving was working with their parents, who were often in their 20s and 30s. And so, and Cancer Care specifically works mostly with children who have a mom or dad with cancer. So not children with cancer, but children who have a mom or dad with cancer. And here I'm enjoying working with their parents who are in their 20s and 30s at a time when we're learning through SEER data and the NCI reports that there had been no progress and no change in adolescent and young adult oncology. And so I was kind of pulled to be part of a steering committee for adolescent and young adult oncology.
Right. What would you say are some of the unique concerns with young adults as opposed to individuals with cancer that are diagnosed at other points in their life, middle age or as a senior?
Well, there's many. I could go on and on and on. How long do we have? There are many.
We've got 40 minutes.
But I think there's been quite a lot of change since I first started working in adolescent young adult oncology, which was like in 2005. So 20 years ago, there's been a good amount of education and awareness around the differences. I would say some significant factors are it's still, even though we might hear of more adolescents and young adults being diagnosed, in the big picture of oncology, it is still not the majority of cancer patients. And because of that, people under the age of 40 feel quite a lot of isolation and like no one else is like me. I'm the only one in the cancer center my age and certainly in my peer group dealing with this. So I think that sense of isolation is significant. I think because it is more rare in adolescent and young adults to be diagnosed with cancer, many of those patients experience delays in treatment or perhaps even at times misdiagnosed because their symptoms are at first perhaps dismissed by themselves. I feel tired. I'm working too hard. My legs hurt. I've got a sports injury. I've got postnasal drip or allergies, seasonal allergies. So a young adult will dismiss symptoms. And then when they first arrive at the hospital, a doctor, because they're young and this is not as common, will diagnose it or misdiagnose it as something else. So unfortunately, many adolescents, and I think this might be changing, but many adolescents and young adults are diagnosed after misdiagnosis and delay, and sometimes at an advanced stage. So there's a difference. They're the largest group in our country that's underinsured too. Adolescents and young adults might also be in transient living conditions. They might be away at college, or they might be living with a group of roommates. Unlike older patients who have family and have a settled life, right? They're kind of transient. They're waiting tables and working at Banana Republic like I was, right? So they're transient and they don't have the same degree of support. So all of those things contribute in addition to life stage things.
Right. And life stage. So not only are they maybe transient when they're living, they may not have an established one-on-one partnership with someone. And then also at that age, they are starting to think about family and fertility and kids.
Fertility is huge.
All of that just is totally
And now, I think now, 2026, medical teams are much better at addressing fertility. But when I started this, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. People weren't preserving fertility. We were making sure everybody could have a wig if they lose their hair. But if you're going to lose your fertility, there was which is also an impact of chemotherapy. There was nothing around
It's still, even though we're aware of it, it's still a huge issue because who's going to pay for it? So it's one thing to say, well, we could take, first of all, it may delay treatment, which even if medically you could without disrupt, it's just philosophically difficult to say, okay, I'm going to take, I know now I got cancer. I know I need a bunch of chemotherapy. I know that this could progress, but I'm going to take time off to go through the process of preserving eggs. Or with males, it's quite a bit easier and less time. But then it's, okay, is it going to get paid for insurance or not? And it may take weeks, if not months, to find out if it's going to get covered or not. And so even if you pay attention to it, bring it up and try to address it, you often aren't successful because philosophically the patients and the doctors and the parents, if they're involved, want to get on with the treatment.
I know it's a really tricky space, and it shows up in my private office a lot. There's a lot of grief around that, or maybe guilt and regret. And, so those big feelings around fertility are different.
Fortunately, we do see a lot of cases where they go through the treatment and they're thinking, they've been advised and counseled that they may not be fertile, and
they are.
Everything works out.
And I often say that too. Let's just hold, and things can not be.
So it doesn't automatically mean if you go through the treatment without taking, without preservation of eggs or sperms, that you're going to end up without successful pregnancy. So this whole transient, I like that word, because not only is their living condition transient, they may have transient relationships going on. They may have transient careers.
Oh, sure. At this developmental age, it's all about intimacy versus isolation, and who am I going to marry, and where's this person? And now I get a date, and I have this big thing I do or don't want to disclose. Maybe there's been changes in my body since this diagnosis. And so how does that feel around intimacy? So all of those things just are very different for a young adulthood who might be who might be entering the dating world, and fertility's in there too. Career, you're at a stage in your life where you're climbing a ladder and you're pushing and you're going. And how do you explain gaps in a resume? How do you reconcile changes in wanting to shift gears at this point? So that's all unique to young adulthood.
And you had mentioned 40 and under. So there's obviously not an absolute clear cut. This is a young adult versus this is middle age versus, okay, over 70, you're a geezer, you're just an old fart.
Wise sage.
But that I think young adult implies still fertile. Implies, you don't have everything all figured out. You're not all set, and that you're still concerned about career that might not be stable yet, and you're trying to prove yourself. Relationships maybe not quite stable. The whole family planning.
It's such a huge age group, right? I mean, I feel like I've got some 20-year-olds who are married with children and totally financially stable and set. And then I've got some 39-year-olds who are like living kind of very off the cuff, so it's such a very diverse group of,
When do you think the actual brain physiology line happens? Adolescents, and especially boys, men, don't quite develop their prefrontal cortex until they're maybe into their 20s, and results in reckless behavior. But so I think that there is a time at which that prefrontal cortex is fully developed. And it just in your practice, I'm not asking you for an absolute scientific answer. Do you think that there's a kind of an age where someone transitions from more the adolescence of young adulthood to the young adult ready to be an adult.
Yeah. I mean, neurologically, that development, we always hear mid-20s in your prefrontal cortex, but I guess I think about it a little bit when I'm sitting in my office more in like a developmental tasks timeline. And there's drives. We have throughout our course of our entire life, we have certain drives. Like when you're 2 years old, you have a drive to do it yourself. Independent autonomy, right? Like that is the drive of a 2-year-old, right? And when you are a teenager, you kind of have a similar drive as a 2-year-old, but you want to be, you want to have your own identity, right? Your own identity. And maybe it's kind of with your peers, but separate. When you're in your 20s and 30s, most 20 and 30-year-olds are wondering who is out there for me. Like, where is this person that I'm going to share? There's a drive to date and to find intimacy and connection. And then as we get older, there's a drive to kind of create some degree of giving back to our world, right? It just keeps going. So when I'm sitting in my office, I'm listening for that. And the lines are blurry, right? The lines are different.
Of course.
And I think some of that work too is helping people redefine how that need might be met outside of the range of kind of how we think, that this needs to be a partner or whatever, but where you find those connections, how you find that community in different ways. So I don't know. I would say it's blurry. I think that, you watch differences as people kind of get to their late 30s and into their 40s.
I think also of the support, the community support that people have. Like right now, I'm just blessed. I could name 10 people that I could call on that would do anything for me if I needed it. And, when you're in young adult, I mean, some are trying to find this independence and this, I don't need my parents. I'm 21. Why would I need parents anymore? That whole, who is there, not necessarily for financial support or to give me a drive, but this emotional support that is so critical to successfully get through a difficult bump in the road of life, whether it's cancer or whatever. But obviously we're talking about cancer, and to what extent do I allow my parents back into my life, even though I'm 23, I'm an adult.
It's so tricky, right? And I feel like I'm thinking of a number of my clients right now who actually, through their cancer diagnosis, had to live at home and needed the support, whether that be financially or practically or emotionally, of their family system. And so they moved at home. And so we have a hiccup in natural development, right? And so I'm sitting with some of my clients who are in their mid-30s who are exploring and feeling finally confident living on their own. And like they can, I am thinking of one client in particular that I worked with who finally moved on her own away from her family and went grocery shopping and was like trying to figure out how to do it without the voice of her mom, like just to grocery shop without thinking, this is what my mom would buy. This is what you should buy. This is what you have to buy. This is what it looks like. Just, I can do this on my own. I can make my own dinner. Those places of feeling more autonomous, more independent. When you've been dependent, it's kind of delayed. There's a delay there. And I think people feel that too with regard to dating. They feel out of sync. They feel so out of sync with everybody. Maybe behind them, but then oddly, in some ways, wiser and older.
Right.
And with a depth of perspective.
Perspective and priorities and just like, okay, you just, going to the bar every Friday night.
Correct.
I don't need that sort of thing.
That's frivolous and a bit annoying to them. And at the same time, they're like, I don't quite know how to navigate the grocery store. Right. I mean, it's like a weird, And
I even imagine, who do you let in, who do you share this information with in terms of your friends, but then acquaintances. And, oh my gosh, I can only imagine the idea of a first date and you're going through chemotherapy and
or even after, right? Like years after.
Yes, years after.
And
at
even
what
like
point
talking
does
about
it? Oh boy, that's going to scare them off if they even hear this.
I feel like people have their own journey to what that is, and I kind of let them have their own journey, right? As opposed to saying this is the way you should disclose. There's no real way, right? It's all you, what feels right for you. And sometimes that journey for some people begins with, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and I'm going to tell them everything. And they were like, how did that work for you? how did that go? What was that like for you and for the other person? And then you begin to learn through the process. And sometimes I think of disclosure, and I talk about disclosure with my clients as a ladder. There's a ladder of disclosure. We don't have to tell everybody everything in one shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps as you get further up the rungs of the ladder, it requires more trust and a sense of safety and kind of almost even a knowing how someone will respond.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you tell them something if you're not entirely sure how they might respond? So that takes time. So
yeah, that whole disclosure issue. I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about specifically fear of recurrence and other maybe synonyms that you use for that uncertainty of the future. And I would like to extend it not just with a young adult, but with the kind of the spectrum, and maybe you talk about it differently. I mean, by the time you get to be, let's say 90 and you're diagnosed with cancer, I would hope that for most 90-year-olds have not only intelligence, but wisdom, and the idea that they may die someday doesn't come to them like a ton of bricks, but for sometimes it may.
It's their developmental place, right?
But at the point in my life, if I were to get cancer, it's like, I pretty much have accepted death, and I might be curious about it, but it wouldn't be like, once you get to be a certain age, it's sad if someone dies, but it's not a tragedy in the scheme of life. When a 30-year-old dies, I mean, it's tragic. Right. So, I mean, maybe talk about this concept of fear of recurrence, and do you like other terms rather than fear of recurrence? And maybe talk about it more generally, not just with the young adult in mind.
I think the vast, if not all, cancer survivors that I have worked with or that I talk to in my personal life, also in my professional life, are navigating, are feeling the heaviness or the shadow of fear of recurrence, worry, uncertainty in their lives. I think it's normal. I think it's understandable. And one of the things that,
and in some ways it's even healthy to be, okay, you've been treated, you're cancer free, but to be aware of your body and your symptoms and things, so that you're not just, I was treated, I'm oblivious, it's never going to come back.
I appreciate you saying that. I say to my clients a lot, feelings are feelings. There's not good or bad feelings. And in fact, they all have a purpose. They all have a role. And fear's job in our brain and in our body, fear's job is protecting you. We need fear. If you're in a dark alley and you feel fear, you should find your car. You should get in it. So fear serves a purpose in our lives. And so does worry. Worry helps us to prepare. Worry helps us to kind of feel ready for whatever's look around the corner. So those feelings are important and they're valid. Sometimes they get a little bossy in our brain and they get a little loud and suffocating or eclipsing every other feeling. So the work with fear of recurrence, or the work as someone kind of lives longer without, no evidence of disease or past treatment, or even with an advanced stage cancer and they're managing progression, right? The work is noticing yourself, and then finding ways to take care of that feeling so that it doesn't get in your way.
One way of doing it, and I'm just saying this to get your response, but then also to talk about other ways. So you think of getting our mindfulness, getting our mind settle down, because this idea of worry about that things might be better kind of baked into our human condition, because the people that didn't worry about anything were eaten by saber-toothed tigers. And so the genes that get distributed through humanity are the people that worried. And so that worry is a natural thing. And, it's definitely good to think and to reflect and to plan. But when you're trying to just get on with your life and your brain is just won't let go of the fact that what if, the next thing you got your funeral plan and you got to see your kids. And so one of the ways of dealing with it is to do some mindfulness training and understand when your mind is just perseverating, and to bring it back to the here and now. Is that a form of cognitive behavior therapy, or would you say mindfulness training is distinct from other forms of cognitive behavior therapy?
I feel that all coping, however you choose to cope, all coping has to begin with awareness. If we don't know we're struggling, then we're not employing coping, right? So all coping, whether you do expressive therapies, like, music, art, whether you do cognitive behavioral work to kind of challenge thinking, and whether you do exercise to get connected to your body, whatever it is that you do to take care of yourself, it all begins with noticing.
Okay.
So I tell my clients all the time, we have to cultivate a habit of checking in with yourself. How am I doing? How am I? And maybe that is cultivating a habit is when your eyes wake up in the morning and you swing those legs over the side of the bed, just taking a quick inventory. How am I? I'm feeling a lot of kind of dread today, or I'm feeling heavier, or my mind is already beginning to click through and think in a sense of overwhelm of everything I have to do. Or, I'm rested. I feel really good. I feel calm. I feel ready for the day ahead. Then maybe you get to lunch, or maybe you do a top of the hour check-in. Just how are we doing? That's the beginning. And that's a little bit what you're saying about mindfulness, right? It's just our minds time travel, are, all over the place, or they get really busy. We're very busy people and we do so much. So how do we stop every so often and just kind of check in with ourselves?
So back to the person who wakes up and they're feeling this sense of dread.
Yeah.
So we've got definitely some negative things. You recognize it as fear or dread. What's the next step to try to assuage those feelings, to get into a better feeling of positivity?
Or just be able to get through into the day. Well, I use a metaphor. I don't know if I've used it when I've talked to you before, but I use a metaphor a lot when I speak, and I use it in my with my clients a lot, of driving in the rain. And my metaphor is that if you're on the highway and you're driving 70 miles an hour, it's fine, and it starts to rain, I hope you drive different. I really do. As a fellow driver on the highway, I hope you drive different. I hope that at the very least, you turn on your windshield wipers. And then if it's really pouring, I would really like for you to slow down a bit. And then if it's that crazy rain that you would just have zero visibility, people turn on their hazard lights, or they even sometimes pull over right? You drive different. So let's take that analogy and think about waking up in the morning and not feeling 100%. How are you going to drive in the rain? How are you going to do this day? You're not 70 mile an hour day. So this day is going to need to look different. And so the beginning is a little, and that's that, we might call that self-compassion. We might call that, kind of lowering our expectations of ourselves and kind of taking it easy. But what does that mean? Does it mean today I'm going to really look at all that I need to do and maybe take off of my list a couple things that I don't need to do today? Maybe I'm quieter today. I'm going to give myself permission to just be quieter. Maybe to those that I love, I tell them, I'm kind of in a mood today. I'm kind of not my best self. That just begins to kind of say, I'm not driving at 100%. And that's when you begin to take care of yourself. So what are we having to take care of? Are we having to take care of wayward thinking that's spinning? Are we having to take care of our body that just feels heavy and tense? Are there emotions that are just pushing under the surface and need our attention? So, we might use, I kind of think of those as the 3 entrance ramps to self-care: your mind, your body, or your emotion. And you get to choose which one do you want to use. If it's your body, then maybe we sit for a minute and we breathe. And we just get grounded and get quiet.
And with your work with clients, do you provide them with those tools so that they wake up, they're aware of themselves? Awareness is the first thing. They're aware, I'm just not feeling I've got this sense of dread. What are some of the tools that you teach them? Obviously, you've already described, you maybe make some changes to your day to recognize you're not at 100%, but rather than just accommodating the way you feel, are there ways to change the way you feel?
Yeah. So I think in my office, we're looking closely at, tell me the story behind your worry. Tell me the narrative behind your fear. A lot of times we discover unanswered questions. Can we find answers to those questions? Could that maybe direct some things that we want to talk to the medical team about? Are these things true? Could there be more truths? So that's all in the thinking realm. And I'm just sitting with a client and I'm really working to understand, like, what's the narrative behind it? What's the word waterfall behind this narrative? Are there distorted thought traps in there of a should, must, and ought, are comparing yourselves to others? We need to catch those traps because they're getting in the way. That's all in the thinking place. In the emotional realm, if somebody is feeling overwhelmed, I think with each emotion, there's different tactics. So we begin to talk about that. Can we name those feelings? In my office, I have a feeling word wheel because people often don't have a very large feeling word vocabulary. That's normal. I think most people use 10 to 15 words again and again and again and again to tell you how they feel. There's so many more feeling words. So can we get more specific about how you're feeling? Because the more specific we can be with how you're feeling, then the better able we are to care for that feeling. And there might be very clear approaches to like overwhelm. For me, you had to break overwhelm down. If you notice overwhelm, we got to break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. So break down the day into chunks of time, break down the task into steps, break down the event into bits. Overwhelm, you want to break down. Anger makes us want to stand up for ourselves. It makes us want to tell somebody off. What are we fighting for? What is threatened with us? Sadness is very, very vulnerable. Sadness wants us to curl up, and we need to find a very safe place to be. So loneliness needs connection. So different feelings need different things. Mm-hmm. And then the third entry, that was thinking and feeling. The third entrance ramp is your body.
But some of those feelings, I would think, from my 72 years of experience, can ebb and flow and come and go.
Yeah.
And to what extent does it need my personal intervention versus let's just take a little off my plate, go with the flow, and not take on any crucial conversations today if I don't need to, and realizing that I'll be back to myself. How many of those things are cyclical in someone who doesn't have a mental health disorder? We all have times when we're up and down, and that doesn't mean we're bipolar. So I guess that's at what point do I use the tools that Julie taught me right now versus I've got 5 more patients to see. I just need to get in the flow of what I'm doing and getting in the flow maybe also.
Wouldn't it be so fantastic if we had a manual? Here you go. Try this decision tree.
I brought you on because I thought you were going to bring
Wouldn't it be so great that there's a decision tree? If yes, do this. If no, do this. But, I think
that I asked that. I bet if you asked Copilot, it would probably
give me like a decision tree. But I think that there probably is that, but it's different for each of us.
Yeah.
And all, as much as coping begins with self-awareness, it all begins with self-awareness. It is all a balance. All of coping is a balance. There are days when you need to cut yourself a break and you need to just take things off your calendar and give yourself permission to just be gentle. There are days when you need to employ that self-compassion. And then there are days when you got to get out of bed, get in the shower, get your clothes on, get out of the house, and get moving. So some days we need self-compassion, some days we need discipline. And I think the work is you understanding yourself. Yeah. Where am I in this? Where am I on the pendulum swing?
Climbing a mountain is sometimes some individuals need a kick in the butt.
Correct.
And sometimes they need a hug.
Sure, that's it.
And how do you know which is going to work the best?
And also, like, what have we been doing a lot lately? We've been doing a lot of self-compassion days. This is a day where, if I look, I tell, that research class I took in grad school does pay off. Look at that. I'm actually using it. I tell people, let's do a little research here. And I want you to just circle, maybe put a numerical quality number next to how you're feeling today. Okay. So it's Wednesday and we're kind of at a 4. And that's how we are today. And then let's look at it. and then do it again tomorrow, and let's see it in a week, let's see it in a month. And if we're there a lot, then we're going to look at maybe a little differently. Maybe there's something more at play, and we'll pay attention to it in a different way. But let's just watch it for a bit, because to your point, all feelings ebb and flow. There's a wave to this, and sometimes it can be really helpful to be like, this is how I am today, and tomorrow I might feel very different.
I'm going to go a little off because there's a question I just am curious about. In talking to my friends who, their kids and maybe even their grandkids, I grew up in the 50s. That I suspect that less than 5% of anybody that was a peer as I was growing up was on any sort of medicine to help with, emotions, anxiety, depression, even ADHD or anything. But let's just stick with this kind of anxiety, depression sort of thing. And now it would seem, from talking to friends who have, teenagers and young adults, that it is very, very, very common for individuals to be on medication to help with anxiety, depression, or some of the things that we've been talking about. I guess my question is that your observation? Do you think that this is and it doesn't have to be either or in terms of medication or counseling. Do you think that we're certainly more aware of mental health, as a health is a good thing, mental health is a good thing, and that mental health is health care? Where are we? Are we ever at a pendulum that's swung one way and too far the other? Or are we in a point of intelligent approach to how do you keep people healthy and functioning?
Man, what a big question. And probably, where so many people are in a different place, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I personally, kind of whenever I'm seeing a lot of struggle in my office, I will go first into, like, again, one of my 3 entrance ramps. Like, let's begin to pay closer attention to that thinking, challenge it, kind of redirect it, learn some skills, some bicep curls around that. Let's figure out some ways to care for the emotion in the body, right? And let's pay attention to that. As to your point about if someone needs medicine, I think it can be very helpful to them. The difference in our generation over time, I think we are inundated. We know way more than we need to know. Like, if back in the 50s, you knew what was happening on your block, then you had a pretty good sense of, like, your horizon line. You're like, all right, we know what's happening on the block 3 other countries away, and every state of this country. We are filled with so much assault to, like, our system of just so much knowledge that sometimes some of the tact too is to kind of try to simplify, begin to measure how much we're taking in, how much stimuli we're taking in, even if it doesn't even have to be stressful stimuli or anxiety provoking, but just, my gosh, the onslaught of our calendars and our schedules, we're just inundated. And I think that is causing biologically and kind of physiologically an uptick in, there's so much happening in the safari or in the prairie, right? Like, I don't know, there's this over here and this over here and this over here, that we're like this all the time. Yeah.
So I think you adequately avoided the question.
That's
okay. No, you didn't avoid it. You addressed it. I don't know whether there's are we too medicated or not medicated?
Yeah.
Back maybe 20, 30 years ago, there was Prozac Nation was a book, but it was back when there weren't a lot of psychotropic medications, and Prozac was the antidepressant, and it was like everybody's on Prozac. And but now there's so many things to choose from. And I just have this perhaps old-fashioned idea that, for myself, I want to learn that the ways of helping myself with more the bicep curl sort of approach to my mind and emotion. But is that not is that an old fashioned?
No. And I think you sit here in a space of understanding the power and the benefit of that, which is beautiful. And I don't know that we do a good enough job, even though we're coming a long way in mental health, explaining that mental health is by far more than medicine. It is this work. I bristle, maybe it's protectiveness for my job, but I bristle at people just getting prescribed medicine without the corresponding effort of learning to care for your body and learning to care for your stress in new ways. So I would very much resist people just taking a medicine and thinking that's going to solve their issues. I also think that to take a medicine and think it's going to go away is wrong. So I say that to my clients all the time. I was like, I've got nothing in my desk or in my, back pocket that's going to take away your fear of recurrence. There's nothing that I'm going to tell you that's going to make your uncertainty, your grief since your diagnosis go away. It's here.
It is.
It's reality, and it's honest. We got to learn how to live with it.
Let's open up to questions. I've got a lot more questions, but I'm not going to be selfish and keep you for the entire hour myself. So those in the audience get first questions. If you are watching us live streaming right now, you can put your questions into the comment section of the software you're using, and so we'll take your questions. But we'll start with our live studio audience.
I've got a question. So how much does the baggage that patients carry when they come in the door play a role in coping with their cancer diagnosis? How do you separate the two, and do you oftentimes have to work in both worlds?
Yeah, you don't get cancer in a vacuum, right? So any previous traumas or any other patterns of coping that have followed you through your life, they follow you here too. But back to that piece that I said about my social work training of a strength-based perspective, something is also at work within you. So you've made it this far. How? So I would be curious to know what patterns may or may not be working for you, what traumas or other life difficulties happened before that might be triggered and showing up again for you. And therefore, we're going to be a little more gentle and understanding with ourselves around those things. But also, what are the historical ways of coping that you've employed in the past that might be really important to remember today?
Let me follow up with one thing you said, is like the traumas. So I'm familiar with ACE, adverse childhood experiences. And I had one guest that really felt that things that happened before the age of 7 had a significant impact on the way we interact as adults. And I guess my question is your counseling technique, do you make an effort to go back to early memories and trying to understand your clients, and to what extent do you think that that's a significant way of understanding someone to then help guide you as to helping them?
I think when people come to therapy, they come for they're presenting issue. They come for many different reasons, right? And some people just want to deal with what's right on the table today. Okay, so it's like a package, and we're going to give you some coping skills, send you on your way. I tend to create quite a lot of rapport and engagement with most of my clients, so they often return. I have clients that I've met with for over a decade or longer, right? Who I don't see regularly, but are like, Julie, I need to come in for a booster shot appointment. Or that I do see regularly. They walked into my door for cancer, but then they continue to come to me with regard to their marriage, with regard to like these issues that kind of continue to surface for them. And so if I'm working with someone and we are working together longer, the doors are opening bigger, yes, absolutely. I will look back to like family history and kind of better understand those early relationships, primarily in the realm of attachment, because attachment is kind of the basis for all relationships. So I'll kind of be listening for attachment. And while attachment doesn't necessarily change, we can become more aware of our attachment style, the ways in which we kind of that gets triggered to some degree, and then have some, either challenge or have gentleness with ourselves.
Okay. Other questions, George?
And our cancer center offers a lot of different integrative medicine disciplines. Do you find that there's one in particular, or maybe a few in particular, that dovetail very nicely with your work and that you find that you're often referring?
Yeah. Yes. I would think for me, obviously a lot of my work in my office is helping people become more aware of themselves, become more aware of their struggle, and then begin to cultivate skills and ways of caring for themselves. So therefore, any of the expressive therapies, music, art, mindfulness, all of those things are going to kind of very neatly connect with what's in my office with regard to noticing and paying attention to yourself. And then how do I care for myself? Yeah.
Other questions? So I have a few more. We're not always on the top of our game.
No.
And how does your mood of the day affect your interactions? And I think it's much different than if you're, an optometrist and you're measuring somebody's eyes and you can interact with them and do your job without maybe affecting what you're doing. It would seem to me that this communication skill that you have, and for an hour that how you come to the session can impact the session. How do you, what do you have to say about that? And how do you think of that?
Well, I can answer that kind of two ways, and you've hit me on an interesting day. But I would say, first and foremost, and probably not too dissimilar to you, I've done this a long time. You've done your work a long time. So, I mean, over 20 years of sitting with somebody. So, and I lean in on my training, right? Not probably unlike the one of those crazy speed skiers that we watched in the Olympics. You just got to lean in on your technique, right? Memory. It's just your technique, right? I have a technique. I have a way of listening. I have a way of putting me over here while I listen to you. So that's all my training, and I lean in on that.
Yeah.
Today, you're hitting me on a today. I recently went through a tricky situation and I have a loss. And today I woke up and I didn't feel good. I did not feel good. I wasn't myself. And so I found all the openings in my day tomorrow, in my day next week. And I knew I had this with you today, and I felt like I could do this, but I couldn't. And so I don't do that often. I really don't. I'm really usually very on point. But what a beautiful thing I always tell myself as my self-compassion, for me to model.
Yeah.
And I don't do it often, but when I send that note and I say, unfortunately, today I need to change our schedule. I'm not feeling well. I need to go home. I mean, that's exactly what I'm asking people to do. So I did. I went home. I took a nap. I went through some emails, got kind of on top of my game, sent that proposal over to Above and Beyond Cancer, and I've come here to you. So there are just days, and that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I notice it. And I respond to it.
I like the way you also talked about your technique, and that gets you through. And also, I think of mindfulness. So once, I'm in a session with a patient and the being totally focused on the listening, as you said, you put yourself off to the side. And so most of the time you can do that. And just the act of listening allows you to forget that you got a cramp in your hamstring, or you got this dread going on about a meeting you have to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, all of that kind of disappears. I kind of get in like a, for lack of a better word, flow. Like I just am in it, right? I also, having done this a long time and been in supervision too, I can interpret my own, what we in therapy call countertransference. So I can sense if I'm tired. I know for me, this is a personal like lock to a key. I know for me, if I'm tired, if I'm sitting and I'm noticing I'm tired, that is a signal to my clinician self that this session isn't getting to what we need to talk about. This client is dancing around what we really need, and my whole body can feel it. So I know when I feel that way, I'm like, we are not where we need to be.
It's not just you, it's this interaction.
This interaction is dancing, and I'm growing tired of that because I'm aware there's more in this meeting. So I know that. I didn't know that when I first started. I know that now, and now I can maneuver. That's like my chess piece, but I didn't know that initially. But as you get older, as you do it longer, you begin to understand those things too.
To what extent, so I'm a big fan of what I'll call narrative medicine and drawing out, not unlike how we started our conversation, where'd you go to school? What was your claim to fame? But it seems to me that there needs to be some give and take, that if I'm going to ask somebody, where'd you go to high school? It would be like, I'm not going to not tell them where I went to high school if they were to ask. So, but there's obviously boundaries. So with your years of experience, where's that happy medium of you and sharing some details to make it an authentic conversation, but obviously appropriate boundaries?
Well, that changes as we get older and as we do this longer too, right? I think when I probably first began, I was very boundaried and very professional. And now as I do this longer, I'm human in the room, right? You very much get my energy, you get my humor at times, you get all of that for me. What I am mindful of is that it is not the role of my patient or the role of my client to ever necessarily feel they need to take care of me, or that they need to be I want them to be sensitive to me. I want them to have compassion, sure. But I don't want them to have to feel like they're being cautious about saying certain things in front of me because I might believe or think something. I don't want them to know enough about me that it might inhibit them to be as honest and free as they need to be.
Right. The role of this relationship is to help
in
the
the
client.
Service of.
Yeah. Well, great. This has been wonderful. And if you have enjoyed this tonight, there's a couple of other opportunities that I'll tell you about. So Julie does a Let's Talk About It series. So once a month, it's a topic-oriented process. And it is it always the same?
Yep. It's the third Thursday of the month at noon.
Third Thursday. So it's virtual. You can, and the format is a topic. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you give a bit of a introduction and a bit of a talk about the topic, and then open it up, and people can turn on their cameras and their microphones and engage in a conversation.
Kind of back and forth.
So that's Let's Talk About It. Do you know off the top of your head the next one and the topic?
I think. You should just log on because they're all going to be fun and great.
Yes.
But I believe the next one is meaning making.
Okay, meaning making.
Meaning making, which is a little like, I know that might carry a lot of like heaviness and weight. Like, I don't want to make meaning of my cancer diagnosis. And yet we know that those who do find some degree of meaning, it facilitates adjustment. So what does that mean? So we're going to talk about that.
So that's next. And then also we're going to have a survivorship conference on June 11th. And if schedules align, which we think they will, Julie will be giving a keynote address on fear of recurrence and other things that go bump in the night.
Coping.
So,
absolutely.
Thank you. If you're watching this program right now and you know somebody that would benefit by watching this program over, it's going to be available on demand beginning tomorrow at the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel and also the Mercy Cancer Center website. So I hope you'll join us again next week. Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.